Hey, tired soul. Before we begin, here's a reminder for you. There's nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing to solve, nothing to finish tonight. The world can wait until morning. And for the next little while, you're allowed to simply rest. Take a slow breath in deeply and gently let it go. Again now. Slow inhale and soft exhale. Feel your shoulders loosen a little. Let your jaw soften and let your breathing slow down naturally. There's nothing you need to force tonight. Sleep doesn't need to be chased. Rest doesn't need to be earned. Tonight, you don't have to carry so much. And now, let's listen to a bedtime story about an exhausted soul leaving behind the noise of the city and slowly finding rest in the quiet mountains beneath the rain. The rain had already started before he left the office. Not heavy rain, just the soft kind that blurred the city around the edges. Most people had already gone home, and the hallway lights felt dimmer now. His phone buzzed once inside his coat pocket. He didn't check it this time. For a moment, he simply stood beside the lobby doors, holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. His shoulder hurt, probably from sitting tense at a desk all week, or maybe all month. It was hard to tell anymore. And somewhere between the silence of the building and the rain sliding slowly down the glass outside, he realized how tired he truly was. Not ordinary tired, not I need more sleep tired, something deeper. The kind of exhaustion that quietly builds while life keeps asking for one more thing, one more deadline, one more reply, one more version of yourself people seem to need. Outside, cars move slowly through rain-covered streets, their headlights stretched across the pavement in long golden reflections. And strangely, the world continued without asking anything from him for a moment. No one needed answers. No one needed him to fix anything tonight. That feeling should have been small, but instead, it felt enormous. The train station was only a few streets away. Normally, he would have walked quickly, head down, already thinking about tomorrow. But tonight, his body moved slower than his thoughts, like some exhausted part of him had quietly decided it had reached its limit. Rain tapped softly against his coat as he walked. A restaurant owner pulled chairs in from outside tables. Steam drifted from a small noodle shop near the corner. Somewhere above him, someone laughed softly from an apartment balcony before the window slid closed again. Little ordinary things, the kind people stop noticing when life becomes too loud. By the time he reached the station, the platform was nearly empty. A woman turned pages quietly beneath yellow station lights. An older man slept near the vending machines with his chin resting against his chest. Someone stirred sugar slowly into a cup of tea farther down the platform. The next train wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes, and for once, waiting didn't feel frustrating. It felt like permission. He sat carefully on the cold bench and let the weight of his bag slide from his shoulder onto the ground. The relief in his neck was immediate. He closed his eyes for a moment. Rain echoed softly against the station roof, steady, predictable, gentle. And little by little, His breathing began slowing on its own. The station lights flickered softly above him, not enough to be unsettling, just enough to make the empty platform feel distant from the rest of the city. He watched rainwater gather near the tracks in slow silver streams. Everything seemed quieter here, even time itself. Somewhere far down the platform, a quiet announcement echoed through old speakers before fading back into silence. No one reacted. The woman beneath the yellow light kept turning pages calmly. The older man near the vending machines still slept peacefully, untouched by the noise around him. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he envied that. Not their lives, just their stillness. He realized how long it had been since he'd sat somewhere without reaching for his phone. How long since he'd listened to rain without multitasking through it. How long since silence had felt safe instead of uncomfortable. The thought settled quietly inside him. Not painfully, just honestly. For years now, his life had moved in constant motion. Wake up tired, rush through mornings, answer messages, finish work, carry stress home, sleep lightly, repeat. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped noticing himself. A soft wind drifted through the open station, carrying the scent of rain and cold metal. He pulled his coat a little closer around himself and looked down the empty tracks, disappearing into darkness. The train would arrive soon. After that, another quiet ride north, toward the mountains, toward the small cabin he hadn't visited in almost 3 years. His grandfather used to spend summers there, a quiet man who woke early, drank tea slowly, and somehow never seemed rushed by life. As a child, he never understood that kind of slowness. Now, he missed it more than he could explain. Rain continued tapping softly against the station roof, steady, predictable, gentle, and little by little, the tightness in his chest began loosening with it. A low vibration hummed softly beneath the tracks. The train was coming. Far in the distance, pale lights slowly appeared through the rain, and fog blurred at first, then clearer as they approached the station. The sound wasn't harsh, just a soft metallic rhythm moving steadily through the night. The woman closed her book carefully. The older man near the vending machines stirred awake with slow confusion before adjusting his coat. Small, ordinary movements, quiet human moments. The train arrived with a long sigh of brakes and drifting mist. Its windows glowed warmly against the darkness outside. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching the doors open. Warm light spilled onto the wet platform, and suddenly, going home didn't feel like returning to a place. It felt like returning to himself. Inside, the train was nearly empty. Soft yellow lights reflected faintly against quiet windows covered in rain. A few passengers sat scattered through the carriage, wrapped in headphones, scarves, and tired thoughts of their own. He chose a seat beside the window near the back. The fabric felt worn but familiar beneath his hands, comforting in a strange way. As the train began moving again, the city slowly drifted past outside. Office towers faded first, then traffic lights, then rows of apartment windows glowing softly against the rain. He watched strangers living tiny pieces of their evenings behind those windows. Someone washing dishes slowly, someone folding laundry, someone reading beside a lamp. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel behind in life, just human, quietly human. The train rocked gently beneath him, steady enough to soften thought itself. Rain slid sideways across the glass in silver trails as the city lights slowly thinned into darkness. Soon, buildings gave way to open roads and sleeping fields wrapped in mist. The world outside became softer now, less crowded, less demanding. Only occasional streetlights appeared along the distant hills, glowing briefly before disappearing behind rain again. Inside the carriage, everything had grown quieter. Even the passengers seemed half asleep now. A young man near the front rested his forehead lightly against the window. An older woman knitted slowly beneath the dim overhead lights, her hands moving with calm familiarity. Somewhere farther down the train, someone yawned softly before silence returned once more. The rhythm of the tracks beneath him became almost hypnotic, a soft, repeating pattern, gentle enough to loosen thoughts he didn't realize he'd been holding on to all week. Deadlines, unread messages, conversations replaying endlessly in his mind, the pressure to become more productive, more successful, more certain about life. Out here, in the dark countryside, all of it suddenly felt very far away, not unimportant, just smaller than it had seemed before. He rested his head carefully against the cool glass beside him and watched rain blur the passing landscape into soft watercolor shapes. Trees, lights, fog, then darkness again. And somewhere between waking and dreaming, he remembered something his grandfather once told him during a summer storm many years ago. Most people don't realize how tired they are, he had said quietly, watching rain fall through the cabin windows, because eventually exhaustion starts feeling normal. Is less than break time equals 30s is greater than. Back then, he hadn't understood those words at all. Now, sitting alone on a quiet train, moving slowly through the rain, he felt them settle deep inside him like truth. The train slowed gradually as it climbed farther north into the mountains. Outside, fog drifted between dark pine trees like slow-moving clouds. Rain still followed beside the windows. Softer now, quieter somehow. Most of the passengers had fallen asleep, heads resting against windows, arms folded loosely beneath warm coats. The entire carriage felt suspended between worlds, not fully awake, not fully dreaming. He watched his reflection faintly in the glass, tired eyes, tense shoulders, a face that looked older than he remembered. And for the first time in a very long while, he didn't immediately look away from himself. The train curved slowly through the mountains. Far below, scattered village lights glowed softly through mist and rain like distant lanterns. Everything out here felt slower, kinder, somehow. His grandfather used to say the mountains changed people quietly, not all at once, just little by little, until one day you noticed your mind had finally stopped shouting all the time. Back then, he thought those were simply old man thoughts. Now, they sounded almost wise enough to miss. The warmth inside the carriage, mixed with the rhythm of the tracks beneath him, slowly pulled heaviness into his eyelids. Not sleep exactly, just softness, the kind exhausted people feel right before they finally let themselves rest. By the time the train reached the mountain station, the rain had become little more than a quiet mist drifting through cold air. The platform was nearly empty. Only a single lantern glowed beside the small wooden station building, casting warm light across wet stone. He stepped down carefully from the train, his shoes meeting the quiet, damp ground beneath him. The cold air touched his face immediately. Fresh, clean, still. And beneath the scent of rain and pine trees, he caught something else. Wood smoke, faint and comforting somewhere in the distance. The train doors closed behind him with a soft mechanical hum. Then, slowly, the train disappeared back into darkness, leaving only silence behind. Not empty silence, living silence, the kind cities forget exists. He stood there for a moment beneath the misty station lights, listening to wind move gently through the trees around him. No traffic, no notifications, no conversations layered endlessly over one another. Only rainwater dripping softly from rooftops and distant branches swaying somewhere beyond the fog. The cabin was still another short walk uphill, a narrow path through pine trees he used to run through as a child during summers that now felt impossibly far away. He adjusted the strap on his bag and began walking slowly into the mountains. The forest path glistened softly beneath the rain. Small puddles reflected pale moonlight through gaps in the clouds above. His footsteps slowed naturally here, not because he was tired anymore, but because everything around him seemed to ask for slowness. Pine trees stretched endlessly into mist on both sides of the narrow trail. Their branches moved softly with the wind, carrying the quiet scent of rain and earth through the night air. Somewhere nearby, water flowed gently over rocks, hidden somewhere deeper in the woods. The sound blended perfectly with the distant rain. As a child, these woods once felt enormous to him, magical, almost. Every trail felt like it disappeared into another world. Now, walking through them again after so many years, he realized the magic had never really disappeared. He had simply become too distracted to notice it. The cabin lights appeared slowly through the trees ahead, warm golden light glowing softly against fogged windows. And something inside him loosened immediately at the sight. Not excitement, not happiness exactly, just relief. Deep, quiet relief. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he felt no pressure to become anything tonight. No performance, no urgency, no proving himself to the world. Only rain, only mountains, only the small warm cabin waiting quietly in the dark. The cabin door creaked softly as he pushed it open. Warm air wrapped around him immediately, carrying the faint scent of cedar wood, old books, and the remains of a fire still glowing quietly inside the stone fireplace. For a moment, he simply stood there listening, the soft crackling of firewood, rain tapping gently against distant windows, the deep stillness surrounding everything else. Nothing had changed very much. The old armchair still sat beside the fireplace, beneath the lamp. The shelves still carried faded books with worn corners and handwritten notes tucked between pages. Even the small ceramic mug beside the sink remained exactly where his grandfather used to leave it after making tea. Time moved differently here, softer somehow. He placed his bag quietly near the door and walked toward the fire, holding his hands near its warmth. His shoulders loosened again without him even noticing. Outside, wind moved gently through the pine trees surrounding the cabin. The sound felt distant now, protected somehow. He sank slowly into the old chair beside the fireplace and let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for months, maybe longer. The exhaustion was still there, but for the first time in a very long while, it no longer felt lonely. The fire crackled softly as shadows drifted lazily across the wooden walls, and little by little, the noise inside his mind began settling into quiet. The rain continued through the night, soft, steady, gentle against the cabin windows. The fire had burned lower now, filling the room with a warm amber glow that flickered softly across the ceiling. Everything felt slower here, even thought itself. He rested deeper into the chair beneath the blanket, draped loosely over the armrest beside him, the kind of blanket that still carried the faint scent of wood smoke and winter air. Outside the windows, fog drifted quietly through the mountains. Pine trees swayed slowly in darkness beyond the rain. The entire world seemed half asleep. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of the storm, he finally allowed himself to stop carrying everything all at once. Not forever, just for tonight. The unfinished work could wait. The unanswered messages could wait. The pressure to have life figured out could wait too. Tonight, there was only this small, warm cabin in the mountains, the sound of rain against glass, and the simple relief of finally resting. His eyes grew heavier beside the fire, breathing slower now, gentler. And as sleep slowly pulled him closer, one final thought drifted quietly through his mind. Maybe rest was never something people had to earn. Maybe human beings were always meant to pause sometimes, to breathe slowly, to sit quietly beside warm light and rain, and simply exist for a little while. Outside, the mountains remained wrapped in mist and darkness. Inside, the fire glowed softly through the quiet cabin, and at last, the exhausted soul finally rested. The fire continued glowing softly beside him. Outside, rain moved gently through the mountains, quiet enough now that it almost blended with sleep itself. The cabin had grown warmer, softer, the kind of warmth that slowly reaches tired parts of you without asking anything in return. He listened to the quiet creaking of old wood settling around him, the faint movement of wind beyond the windows, the slow, steady rhythm of his own breathing. Nothing needed to happen anymore tonight. No rushing, no fixing, no proving. Only rest, only quiet, only this small, peaceful moment, hidden deep in the mountains beneath the rain. His eyes remained closed now, heavy and comfortable beside the warmth of the fire. Thoughts still drifted through his mind sometimes, but slower than before, much slower, like leaves floating quietly across dark water. Some thoughts disappeared before fully forming. Others softened gently and passed without needing answers. And maybe that was enough tonight. Maybe not every feeling needed to be solved before resting. Outside, fog continued drifting silently between the pine trees. The mountains remained awake, only in the quiet way mountains always are, still, patient, watching over the sleeping world below.